Hi, welcome to another episode of Easy Peasy with the Smithsonian. My name's Allison Leitner. I'm an instructional designer here at the Smithsonian, and I'm here with my colleague Tess Porter, as well as Jim Reese from the Washington International School and Aleah Myers from DCPS. We're excited to have you here with us as we model some thinking routines from Harvard Project Zero. In the spirit of modeling, we're going to get started with a social emotional learning question. So I'd like you to use the chat to type in an issue that is important to you that you think other people should care about. And while you're doing that, I'm going to turn it over to Tess.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for that question, Allison. I'm looking forward to seeing the responses. My name is Tess Porter, and I'm an educator here at the Smithsonian. As many of you may know, this is one of a series of webinars that we've been holding twice a week, every week for the last couple of months. All of those sessions have been archived, and you can find them either on YouTube by searching Easy Peasy or on the Learning Lab by searching Easy Peasy there as well. Each collection comes with each webinar comes with a collection of resources. At the end of today's session, I'm going to share the collection we've created for today. It includes resources that we'll talk about together that Aleah and Jim will demonstrate and use as they model, and additional resources that'll provide some additional context and extension opportunities. For the majority of today's session, I'm going to be hiding behind the scenes, doing a little bit of screen sharing, but I'll be back at the end to talk about the collection. Jim, how about you?
Great. Hi, thanks, Tess, and thanks, Allison, for that question. We're getting some nice, interesting responses in. We're really excited today to have Aleah Myers with us, and Aleah and I go back about 4 years. She was involved in a project on global competence education that Veronica Boix-Mancia from Project Zero led with a cohort of teachers from Cook Elementary School, from McFarland Middle School, and from her school, Roosevelt High School. And Roosevelt is a wonderful high school in a fantastically renovated building up in Petworth on 13th Street at Upshur. And Aleah struck me from the very beginning as a really passionate, committed, but also outstanding educator. She's a science educator, and she really always pushed herself in this global competence project to help her students make connections with the wider world. And so we're really thrilled to have her here with us today to demonstrate ways that she does that. She also was involved in a project with me last year called Museums Go Global, and Tess and my assistant Abby and I co-led that project. And Aleah was a teacher participant building collections within the Learning Lab. And so I'm excited for you to get to know those collections at the end of the session today with Tess, and then at the end of the session on Friday. And this week is a little bit unusual in that we have these sessions on Wednesday and Friday instead of Monday and Wednesday, but the Memorial Day holiday got in the way. And so we decided to do 2 sessions on work days, Wednesday and Friday. So here we are. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Aleah and let us get started with her ideas about how we can bring Project Zero into the science classroom.
Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Jim. As Jim said, I've been teaching upper level sciences at Roosevelt High School for the last 5 years. And Roosevelt is a DC public school, but we're also a global studies school. So what that means is that we are really encouraged to incorporate learning activities that build our students' global competence into really every aspect of learning. So with distance learning upon us, I really just didn't want that to stop. So I've been incorporating these Project Zero thinking routines into my distance learning activities. And we're going to be practicing 2 of my favorites today. So the first one that we are going to practice is called What Makes You Say That? So we can just go ahead and jump into that. We're going to practice these routines today with an artwork from a collection I created called Environmental Advocacy Through Art. So Tess, if you could bring up the first piece, perfect. So the purpose of this first routine, What Makes You Say That, is really to have students take a close look and practice the art of noticing and close looking at different works, as well as create claims and then support those claims with evidence. And these skills are just so important across the board, but especially in the science classroom. So we can just jump right in. So the first part of this routine asks students, what is going on? And this is where students would come up with a claim about the piece. So if we would just take a few moments to notice what's going on, we can just look from top to bottom and left to right. And when you think you're ready, you can type into the chat box a claim about what you think is going on in this piece. And Jim, now that you have had a few moments to notice, if you could share your claim whenever you're ready.
Sure. I'm going to say a few things about what I'm noticing, because maybe that'll help me formulate my claim. So I see in the upper part of the piece kind of this almost bucolic scene. There's a park. It looks like a park on the edge of a body of water, maybe a river, with a beautiful blue sky and a few white clouds and a bird flying. But there's a cityscape in the background, which is interesting, contrasting with the trees. So all of that looks really, really nice. And then this human figure that's in the foreground with very deep blue eyes, with the face partially submerged in water. And that's where the piece gets really tricky. So there we have, and you see these drops coming off of the person's face. And then you go down and you see beneath the water, submerged, is what looks like a skeleton to me. And then the skeletal figures of fish as well, all kind of swimming in the same direction. So it becomes kind of fantastical and odd, almost science fiction-like or dystopian-like or something with that. So with that, I'm going to make a claim that there are dangerous things lurking beneath the surface in bodies of water.
Okay, so there are dangerous things lurking beneath the surface in bodies of water. And Jim, the next part of this routine and the next thing that we'd ask students is, what is it that makes you say that? So here's where you pull some evidence from your noticings in order to support that claim. And as Jim's thinking about that evidence, everyone else can go ahead and answer what makes you say that into the chat box.
Okay. So I'm going to pull from the chat box too, and a claim that's kind of like mine that Jonathan makes, that even the idyllic has unforeseen consequences. So this underneath the surface kind of thing. So what makes me say that is that the sort of the full human figure that we're getting a hint of above the surface of the water. So it's hard to tell if it's a man or a woman. I'm going to make a claim that it's a man. But everything seems fine above the surface. It's just somebody maybe who's just submerging or coming above. But eventually this person will need air because the nose and the mouth are underwater. But when you get underwater, you see this skeletal figure, and skeletons often make me think of death, of decaying, and that kind of thing. And so you also have the skeletal figures of the fish. So that's what prompted me to think of danger, that this whatever is underneath the surface can make your skin fall off or make your organs fall out or just reduce you to a skeleton. And so it just feels very dangerous to me.
Absolutely. And I'm curious if even the idyllic has unforeseen consequences, if there's some evidence to support that claim as well.
Yeah, so it makes me think about possibly that this beautiful scene in the back on the edge of the water where you have this nice park, but then there's this city there too. It makes me wonder, so what made this water so dangerous for this person to swim in it? And it's making me wonder about a claim maybe that in cities, there are a lot of dangerous things that flow into the water, and and therefore it can make the water very dangerous for us to swim in or drink from.
Absolutely, and I think those are two really powerful claims. And I think when I'm looking at this, I'm also noticing maybe the water dripping off the man's face. Is this sweat? Is he noticing something above that we just can't see below, and kind of the wrinkles on the side of his face? Is this some hints that there are some things going on that are unforeseen from the surface?
You know, I thought the same thing. You know, while immediately you think that it's I think your initial thought, or my initial thought, was that it was water coming off of his face, but he doesn't look all that wet on his head, and so therefore it almost feels like worry. These are beads of sweat that are from concern or worry, or maybe something's heating him up and it's causing him to perspire. You know, all kinds of things run through my head, but again, it brings across this kind of fantastical image of what's really going on here.
Well, Kirsten also noticed the perspiration, and she says she thinks the person's perspiring because they're working hard to maintain that idyllic world. And her claim was that there are things we see and things underneath that aren't seen. And so he's perspiring with the hard work it is to maintain this idea.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. Absolutely.
Yeah, I noticed that Brian is saying that the eyes are not nice, that above is sinister, below is stripped away and honest. So almost, while I was talking about it being this idyllic, almost bucolic scene or something on there, he's seeing that there's being something sinister there with the eyes not looking so nice. They look almost too intense, or looking straight at us. Maybe there's something sinister going on there.
Yeah, and Stephanie says that she wonders if it's emphasizing personal responsibility because there's only one person in the image and that person is prominent and in the center.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, so in the classroom, we would probably spend a significant amount of time talking about this as well, and just making sure that everyone really has a chance to dig into these different things that they're noticing. And after we kind of did that, the next thing we would do is we would, with this piece, kind of try to put ourselves in the context. So after we've taken a closer look, I would then employ the next thinking routine that we're going to talk about, which is the 3 whys. And this routine really asks students to consider why the topic or why the content is important or significant in 3 different contexts. And it really helps students by really considering these different contexts and thinking about the significance. Why might they want to study whatever it is that we're talking about? Why might they want to dig deeper in? And helps them really develop an intrinsic motivation, which is just so important always across the board in the classroom. But now that we're learning at home, it's even more important to just make sure that students are really devoted and bought into the content that we are learning. So how we are going to do this routine is we're going to do it in 3 different parts. And I really like to isolate the 3 different contexts first if we're just talking about engaging with content. So the first question that we are going to consider with this is, why is this topic important to me? And how I would really frame this question is I would take one of the claims. And I think that the claim that we are going to think about is maybe Jim's claim that there are just dangerous things lurking beneath that we can't see. So my question would be, why are dangerous things or dangerous underlying things in the environment important to you? And we can take a second to think about this one, and then feel free to type your answers into the chat box. But again, why are these dangerous underlying things in the environment important to you? And Jim, after you've had a second to kind of mull this over, feel free to share your thoughts too.
Sure. A few things come to mind. First of all, there are emotions, feelings that come into it. It just scares me that there could be dangerous things that I can't see, and so there's just it takes me almost back to childhood and going into the ocean for the first time and not sure what lurks beneath the water, whether they're creatures or things like that. I think those are sort of typical feelings that children might have, or even adults might have. But when you think about something like this, where it's toxicity or chemicals, something there that could be hurting us, that is really hard to see. It sort of compounds that scariness. So it just conjures up like hard feelings for me, scary feelings.
Absolutely. And I think the feelings is super interesting as well, because that is the first thing that I'm thinking of as well. And again, I'm seeing the emotion in the piece and thinking about the sweat that might be coming from the man's face, and maybe even some gray hairs if we look pretty close,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe how those feelings are having this physical response as well.
Mm-hmm.
So the next question that we would think about after we considered why the topic might be important to us is why this topic might be important to the people around us, or the people in our community. So why is this idea of hidden issues and hidden waste or toxins in our environment important to the people around us and those in our community?
Mm-hmm. That's making me think about children, and just the danger to children, the desire that children might have when they see a body of water that looks inviting, and it's a hot day, and there's a beach, and you just want to go in and swim, play around, and it just makes me worry about the well-being of children. Certainly, it makes me worry about the well-being of everybody, but I don't know why my mind goes immediately to children, because I think that they would be so tempted to want to go into the water and splash about. And if there are things that are dangerous to them, they would be so susceptible, I would think, to those dangers.
And I think that's such a great point too. And even kind of going back and noticing the water does look so beautiful above the surface, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not clear.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important to note that children wouldn't be able to see. They would just see the beautiful idyllic lake and maybe not consider what might be underneath. So
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we have some comments in the chat too that talks about this idea of being in isolation. So like Kirsten says, we don't live in isolation. So one person's behavior can have impact on another's. And Ashley says it makes her think about the shared community spaces and the leave no trace principles when hiking. And Jan talks about the interconnectedness of all beings. So this idea that we're not alone.
Yeah. Kirsten made a comment earlier on that when she was thinking about why does this matter to her, she said it reminds her of the coronavirus that we're currently fighting, and that idea that it's it's been termed the unknown enemy or the unseen enemy, that kind of thing, and so it has that kind of connection as well, that we can't see it, but yet we can certainly be very, very adversely affected by it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that really just takes us into our next question with how can something like this, how can this hidden danger, or why is that important to our world or the people in our world?
That makes me think about, and Jan made this connection to that Allison mentioned, the interconnectedness of beings. It just makes me think about the interconnectedness. So, a body of water often has a source, or it connects to another body of water. So anything we put into one body of water is going to have a ripple effect on others. So it makes me think about that interconnectedness, and that the repercussions or the consequences are not limited to just us, but they're going to have this far-reaching effect, sometimes well beyond our own community. And so makes me think about that. It also makes me think about, I was just supervising some 5th grade students on a project they did on water pollution. And I was just so taken by how passionate they became and some of the stories that they wanted to tell through their project. And they were really, really concerned about the way that pollution in the oceans was affecting sea animals, and that there was just so much danger that humans were causing to animals because of that. So it made me think about that. We might not think about putting something in, say, a creek that's right near me that flows into Rock Creek, that then flows into the Potomac River, that then flows into the Chesapeake Bay, and then flows into the Atlantic Ocean. But something I put in there could very well have an effect on something many, many miles away from me.
Yeah, and there are a couple comments in the chat like that too. So Carol says that much of our food supply is based on healthy water. Ashley saying she hadn't noticed the ripple in the water until Jim, you had just said about a ripple effect, and it was purposely a choice of the artists. And Joan mentions that global warming's here and the effects are becoming more costly the longer that they're not addressed.
Absolutely. And I think that this theme and this idea of interconnectedness is really what I would want my students to kind of pull from this as well. So just to provide a little bit more context, this is an activity that I will and have done with my environmental science students who are 11th graders. The collection that this piece is pulled from, again, I mentioned, but it is called Environmental Advocacy Through Art. So students are really thinking about all of the issues we learned about throughout the year, and then thinking about how they can use art to kind of send a message about one of these issues that calls people to action. So we can clearly see how this routine is really powerful in having students situate themselves into the content, having them think about those global connections, and really like making sure that they are really invested in what we're talking about. So the next thing that I would do to wrap up this portion of the activity would be to show them how this artwork was used to send a message on a New York or a Time magazine 1985 cover. So in class, we would take time talking about this cover, noticing the text that was paired with the piece. I would share a little bit more context about the piece, i.e. it is called Toxic Wastes. And now we see that title on the cover of Time magazine, and really just what message this art can send to really just anyone and what statement can be made. So if we'd had more time today, I would love to dive into that a little bit more. But I would just like to kind of close my portion with the fact that I'm really trying to design content that students are really, really engaged with during this time, but also really inspires them to be able to make a difference. So thinking about how they can create something that inspires others or really dive into making a difference on the issues that they care about.
And I wonder, Aleah, if we might, you mentioned earlier that the way you would normally use this routine is to isolate each of those three questions in the 3 whys. And I'm wondering if you could just say a little bit about what benefits there are by doing that process, by isolating them, asking the questions not at the same time, but asking them in separate streams.
Sure. So I think that the isolation of the questions is really impactful when we are kind of diving into new content or we're engaging with something new, whether it's a new project or a new topic. And just starting with the question, why is this important to you? Because it really does help students kind of step back and think, oh, why does this matter? Why is this significant? On a personal level, and maybe thinking about feelings like Jim mentioned, and then being able to build that context and make some of these local, global me connections, which I've just found has been so impactful, especially in terms of distance learning. But kind of on the flip side of that, I also love to use 3 whys as a reflection activity. So after we've talked about something for a significant amount of time, and kind of having students go back and think, oh, why was this important to me and my community and the world? When I pose these questions, when they're more so reflection questions, I usually like to do them together so that students can kind of think about all of these different contexts and then get their thoughts down into kind of these different buckets in whatever order that they're most comfortable with.
Great.
Whether that's zooming in from the world to themselves or zooming out.
Great. No, I think that's really important, and I think it's a great model for us to see how these routines can be adapted, and also how we can be flexible with them to use them for the intended purpose. So thanks for sharing that as well. And I'll just say that the 3 whys, we call it a global thinking routine. What makes you say that is one of the general thinking routines, but 3 whys is a global thinking routine that was developed by Veronica Boix-Mancia and her research team at Project Zero. And again, we had the pleasure and privilege of working with Veronica, Aleah, and I in a project with DC Public Schools back in 2016, 17, and 2017 and 18 to really try out these global thinking routines with students to see what effects they had on their ability to make that connection between local and global. And so it's just wonderful to have the opportunity to share that here today. So with that, we're going to move back to Tess. So Tess is going to come back, and she's going to guide us through the collection that she's created for today's session. So Tess, it's all yours.
Thank you. And thank you, Aleah. That was really fantastic. So I want to take this moment to say first, again, that this session will be archived, and you can watch it again at the same link. So if you want to rewatch and or share this with a colleague, you can do so at the same URL you're watching it at now, whether you're joining us on YouTube or on Facebook. We've developed a collection of resources for this webinar today. I've added the link in the description of the session, whether you're watching us on YouTube or Facebook, but you can also find this collection if you search the Smithsonian Learning Lab for Easy Peasy. It pulls together all of the resources we looked at today, the toxic waste, original artwork, and the time cover as well, alongside some additional resources that can help provide context and extension. So I wanted to, in the last few minutes we have together, walk through what you'll find here briefly. You should see the collection on the screen now. You'll see first the toxic waste original artwork, the Time magazine cover here. Then the 2 resources that follow are the Project Zero routines that Aliyah did a fantastic job of modeling for us today. First, what makes you say that? And the 3 whys. For each of these resources, if you click on the information button on the left-hand side of the screen, that's where you'll see additional information about the resource. For the routines in particular, you'll find some more guidance on using this routine with learners. So suggestions of types of resources it works particularly well with, additional suggestions for scaffolding and kind of facilitating this routine in students. Then, in the context and background section, we have a short video from Project Zero talking about the Project Zero thinking routines and kind of how they're designed and the types of thinking that they support. In lessons, we have a link to the environmental advocacy through art activity or unit that Aliyah just mentioned. That unit where she asked her students to create an artwork to send a message or as a call to action about an issue that they care about. So here you'll see she's gathered together a variety of artworks, toxic waste, but also many others that address environmental issues. Here she's also included her daily lesson sequence and more to help facilitate this. So if you're interested in kind of seeing what Aliyah did as inspiration for facilitating something similar for your own students, I highly recommend checking this out. Again, that's located in the lessons section. And then finally, in the final section of the collection, we've included 2 links to, one is the link to the archived version of the webinar that you're watching right now. And then the final one is a link to additional webinar opportunities from Project Zero. So it's our hope that all of this will be helpful to all of you moving on from today's session. Allison, I'm going to hand it back over to you.
Sure. Thanks so much for joining us. Thank you, Aleah. This was really great. I think it's really nice to see how these thinking routines can be used in science as well. Aleah will be back with us on Friday at 1 p.m. And so we hope to see you all there. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode, and we'll see you Friday.